just worked out. Thank you for that lovely review that you did to camera, saying very, very nice things. Yes.
Thank you.
Very, very good. Yes.
Yes, and I meant what I said. I think this is.
Thank you.
I hold this album up there with the finest of your albums. It's absolutely remarkable. But then I'm a sucker for a narrative and a concept.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yes. I mean, it's amazing that it works so well. My wife Jo said, she said at various times to me that, I think a story will work very well. And then I take a deep breath and I go, oh, well, I've got to deliver this. But then if you can get each section down to perhaps a one-word description of sad, angry, thrilled, etc., then perhaps you can self-commission and then you say, yeah, well, okay, it's a limitless array of colors available. All you got to do is just write the movie and stick the soundtrack on it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I've got to do this little intro, otherwise Sharon will be sending me an angry email, and that is
right.
The album. This, as you've alluded to, check out my review. There is a card just up there. But this album, The Circus and The Nightwhale, is available this Friday, I believe, 16th of February. This is the vinyl edition. But that's the red vinyl edition. It's available on CD, media book, and standard CD version as well from Steve's very own shop. First question I'd like to ask Steve is: the symbol of the whale is a potent archetype in literature and art. Is that why you wrote it for your story?
Yes. Well, originally Jo was the one who suggested the title. We had an idea of it being autobiographical. Mm-hmm. There were enough emotions that were running high, so we felt we could fund that. But we kicked around various circus titles, and I said, well, it's all been done with circuses, But she said, well, how about the Circus and the Nightwhale? And I thought, oh, that hasn't been done. What does that mean? And then she was saying that she felt that the whale or the night whale was a sort of transformative thing. And so she said, oh, it's facing your deepest fears and having survived that, come out the other side of it. So it was a sort of transcendent idea. And I thought long and hard and remembered when I was going through my equivalent of a nervous breakdown, just trying to make things work at one point, and knowing that at one point I was in a hotel room laying down on a bed when one way of life wasn't working out and I needed to move on to another way of life, and I was literally shaking and I couldn't stop. And I thought, oh, this is probably a nervous breakdown, but I'm not going to admit this to anyone. Once I come through this, once I get a grip on myself. So I have been through those moments. So it's not all been plain sailing, to use the seafaring.
It's nautical metaphors.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you may well have answered my question already. I was going to ask about the image of emerging from the beast as a metaphor or analogy of biblical proportions. Do you see the emerging from the whale as a rebirth?
Yes, absolutely, yes. I think once you've made that leap of faith, whatever it is, to quote Joseph Campbell, probably very badly, something about, and it's at the end of an amazing book that he wrote, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, or is it Hero with a Thousand Faces? And he talks about, right at the end, about it's not whatever the celebration of is going on in your life, and I'm paraphrasing here, within the tribe, but private moments and private tears and all of that. But it's also harping on about the idea of the moment that you forget about yourself and a significant other becomes more important. And I include the idea of either the sort of greater love hath no man, etc., etc. But I think that somehow there's a parallel with Lamb Lies Down on Broadway with this that was brought home to me. The idea of, I think it was Brother John, wasn't it? I do happen to have a brother John, but Peter Gabriel's words, the idea of trying to save his brother and finding out that his brother was really himself, and all of that. And I've had a similar thing with Jo my wife, where I felt that it was so important to be there for her, never mind if that meant that it was all going to be artistic and financial suicide. I had to do that and extricate myself from that which wasn't working, in order to, be there for her. And once you make that commitment, that step where someone else is more important than yourself, something starts to happen that's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that you mention The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. There's a wonderful essay
Yes.
by Richard Kress, and he says, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is about two most important elements in the universe, life and love. Do you agree, and to what extent is this applicable to your new album?
Well, I've found out more and more that it is about love.
Hmm.
Yes, it is. And I'm not a religious person because I don't like the idea of dogma. I don't like the idea of hypothesis being posited as certainty.
Hmm.
So, whether it's Buddha, Jesus, the Trinity, and the Holy Mother of God, and all that, I'd rather say I believe that there's a world of spirit. I believe that the connection between those worlds can happen. I believe that healing is possible. I believe that the subtext of music is to heal, if not to merely re-energize people. And I was having that conversation today with a doctor, funnily enough. Yeah, so, proudly going forth and doing what we do, living out of a suitcase, it feels it's validated. I've had healing done for me,
Uh-huh.
and I know that some of the things that I've done have healed others. So it's all part of the continuum, really. I'm a cog in the wheel of all of that. Not always special, but the work. I do believe in the work, and at times I've felt that I've had to defend the work at the expense of me personally. Now that might be ego talking there, or it might be really that I really am very proud of some of the things that I did, especially collectively within the band Genesis.
Hmm.
You couldn't always be the writer because you weren't always allowed to be the writer, but you could be, the midwife for the brainchild that was about to be born, such as Washer of the Skies, by making sure that the mellotron was available, and the wonderful things that Tony did with it as probably the greatest mellotron player ever, and therefore as as a composer, with this kind of Zatz orchestra that is the Mel. I don't know if I can finish that. It's an open-ended question. Where does one start and the other stop?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Dogma. The poet Philip Larkin said Christianity is a vast moth-eaten musical brocade created to pretend we never die. Is he right, or is he just being
Right.
a miserable bugger?
Well, I think there are those who firmly believe that when you die, you die. But then I've had spiritual experiences to support I'll come down on the other side of the argument and say that I do believe, like Lennon said, we all shine on. And I'm quite. It's a marvelous quote that you come up with from Philip Larkin. But a young friend of mine many years ago said, why all this development
Hmm.
if we weren't going to survive? But then you have to question the idea, if there's a God, why does he feel the need to torture us to death before we're considered worthy to
Yeah.
stoop to his knees, etc., etc.? So I think, if that upsets the Christians, then so be it. But I'll certainly I'll be interested in encountering anyone who's a healer who
Yeah.
can really produce life, etc., or save it, or whatever. Um, I don't know. Marvelous quote, by the way. Very good, eloquent man that you are.
Well, I've got another marvelous quote for you, actually. It's relevant. We've talked about God and faith. Friedrich
Mm.
Nietzsche said, once we've killed God, I mean, there's no idea of transcendence. Man will descend into um, uh, what, nihilism or totalitarianism. Looking at the 20th
Yes.
history. Was he right?
Well, I think that there are those who saw a blueprint in his words, but it doesn't mean to say that it was the right move. I think it's very easy to
Dark
be a
stuff,
very
though, isn't it?
yes. It's very easy to be a very cynical poet or poetical cynic.
Uh-huh.
But at the end of the day, it's what you experience, your empiric experience. I met Michael Benteen very briefly, who was giving a
Oh,
talk,
lovely.
who wrote a very wonderful book, at least one wonderful book called The Door Marked Summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I used it in a lyric, just that line, and talking about Peter Pan and my dad and the two Peters in my life, the guy who introduced me to the statue and the same guy who painted paintings that he sold along the railings of Bayswater Road, Hyde Park, when I'd written a song called the Serpentine Song, all about Hyde Park, going around the lake in all its seasons and what that meant to me. My way of painting it with music. But I like to think that he's still around. I've been missing him a lot recently, and he doesn't often crop up in dreams, but I've been acquiring quite a lot of his paintings recently. They just seem to find their way to me, and it seems as if there's I've been having a conversation with my brother about this, that we must get round to doing a posthumous celebration of his artwork with an art exhibition, and we really must get around to this. I know that we're both very busy, but we really must do this. There's a lovely painting on the wall here which you can't see, but it's the Fairy Glen in Wales, and it was a favourite subject of his. He rather liked Wales when he was evacuated during the war when he was a boy. I think he quite liked exploring his Welsh roots, and sometimes in paint. Sorry.
So I find the older I get, the you have to get used to losing people. But the thing is, the great philosopher Rocky Balboa said, "The older I get, the more you got to leave behind." I think
of course, yes, yeah, all of that, and it's terrible saying goodbye to friends, because you, oh my God, so many gifted musicians and singers that I've passed. John Wetton, Ian MacDonald, Chris Squire, more. There are more. Jim Diamond.
I mean, we talk about these ideas of spiritual awakening. Is there a spiritual aspect to the journey or awakening on this album? The reason I mention it is because the music of Genesis seems quite hymnal and churchy at times.
Yes.
I just wondered what kind of awakening are you alluding to on this album particularly?
Well, whether this album has the hymnal and churchy aspect and the sort of first inversion chords that we associate so much with classical music, I know that one of his more revealing moments, because Tony didn't open up very much, Tony Banks this is, but he said that whatever had gone wrong at school, by the evening when he experienced evensong, everything will be made right. So I think, all crooked ways being right, just with the music. So I think there was a lot of the church organist in him, as there is the cathedral organist in Roger King, who I, think of they're all extensions, I think, of the great keyboard player in the sky, J.S. Bach, etc., etc., etc. The idea of through composition and great playing and transcendent work. Yes, there was a lot of that in Genesis. Not the only band to be affected by that. I think maybe the nearest relation harmonically might have been Procol Harum.
Okay.
And I was just getting to know Gary Brooker a little bit. We were going to spend some time together, and then COVID struck and it didn't happen. And he very kindly given me a name check on stage, and I thought, oh my God, wow, I've got, if I got to work with this guy, it might have been the nearest equivalent to working with Richie Havens, who was a godlike presence vocally, and I worked successfully with him on some unforgettable memories. Sorry?
Wasn't Please Don't Touch?
Please Don't Touch, yes. Yeah, we were only going to do one song, and then he pushed me to do another, and he learnt it on the spot, the other side of the dodgy cassette, and we did it that night. We stayed up all night recording these two songs, and I let him take over. And he said, "Yeah, you come out with me on the studio floor. You put down the guitar, and I'll play percussion." And he had a cigarette dangling out of his mouth and a trilby hat on, and it's just absolutely bloody unforgettable. Then he goes in and sings the balls off this thing with me 3 feet away from him. But if I hadn't said so before, it was a bit like, it's a bit like God asking for approval, saying, "Is this all right? Are you kidding?" Just, the most amazing. So I'd written something that was a bit Beatlesque for him, and but I didn't have the guts to play it to him until he said, "Look, please, let's do another." And it was the day he'd flown in from New York to LA, been picked up in the van, insists on going in the back of the van. And I said to him, "You must be tired after we'd done one song." He said, "No, I don't get tired." There you go, another one. And and he just sang this amazing performance of something that he sounded like he'd sung all his life, because I knew he liked Beatles things. So I thought,
well, you talk about wonderful singers. You had Steve Walsh singing on that album, and he had a fine set of pipes in his day.
Fantastic. And Randy Crawford too, who had a huge solo career on this side of the pond. In America, she's only really known for being the singer on the Crusaders' Street Life. They don't know her beyond that. So, it's a whole undiscovered continent for them, the idea of that. So, yeah.
Is there not an album that deserves unearthing regarding as you do these tours? Do you not feel doing? And it's an interesting that album, because it seems to be a massive shift. It's your first solo album after leaving Genesis.
Yes.
And there's a massive shift in a sort of tone and flavour of the music. Is this you kind of thumbing your nose at Genesis to a certain extent?
I wasn't trying to make a non-Genesis-like album. I was aware that I needed to make a different album from Voyage of the Acolyte, which was perhaps more pastoral and melotronic and wafty. Whereas, and I'm not putting it down, because, I invested all I had in it emotionally and loved doing it. But Please Don't Touch was more a case of trying to do the equivalent of, in the late 1960s, CBS were releasing a number of albums called The Rock Machine Loves You, or The Rock Machine this, that, and the other. And they were compilation albums of many of the acts that they had on CBS. So you'd get Roy Harper twinned with Simon and Garfunkel, twinned with the Grateful Dead, Tim Rose, young Leonard Cohen, and very much sort of singer-songwriter type things. And you could listen to this stuff. People would put it on at parties and gatherings, and yes, this would be as good as listening to one act that you really like, because the level of variety. So I wanted to do a sort of personal taster album. In other words, I can do pop, I can do something that's a little bit classical that happened to turn on a Yehudi Menuhin, or I could do something that's kind of jazz rock, it's kind of fusion-y, and then there'd be the atmospheric things, and of course, thinking of the various singers who were very capable of doing very convincing rock or very convincing spiritual stuff in the case of Richie Havens, or indeed the jazz-tinged ballad that was made possible by Randy Crawford. Once I realized the key to working with her was it's a little bit the same like working with Paul Carrick. You can't really get them to sing the line. They always sing a variation. You might as well have a choir on it, like The Living Years with Mike Rutherford. He's not actually singing the line, Paul. And the same thing with Randy Crawford. It was gonna walk out on me because it looked like she was singing it and the tuning wasn't quite right. And she said, I think you should get Shirley Bassey to do this. And I thought, oh, I'm going to lose her. I said, well, forget what's on paper. Just make the song your own, improvise around it. And then the magic happened. And she sang wonderfully. And at one point, she goes into full Aretha Franklin mode when she lets loose, because she was a big Aretha fan.
Yeah.
At one point, she invited me to an Aretha concert. And she was singing in my ear. So I had one great singer on stage, and every word, every line being sung to me by Randy Crawford.
Yeah.
And when I saw her live, I was there to see Randy Crawford. I was there to see Jaco Pastorius, who I met very briefly. And she was a support act with, I think it was a trio, bass, drums, a piano, and she was doing very much a jazz set, but the embellishment that she brought to the end of all of the lines, the audience clapped her at the end of every line with every variation that she did. And you just knew that this was the real thing, and she wasn't a star at the time. And I guess in a small way, this sort of launched her on the British audience, if not the European audience. So I was very lucky with that, very lucky to get her at that time.
I mean, there's some great, absolute great singers you mentioned, but talk about singing.
Yeah.
You've stretched your own voice considerably on this album.
Yeah,
you seem to be doing
I've tried harder.
You seem to be doing quite well. How do you feel about your singing these days?
For a few albums now, I've not been trying to be a belter, but more of a balladeer and let the energy come from the guitar. Maybe I'll go back to having a go at being a belter. I'm listening to a lot of radio, Planet X or whatever it's called, or Planet Rock. I don't know. Anyway, and
maybe you could be the prog equivalent to James Brown.
Yeah.
Got the moves.
That's right. I loved it when the guys he would just sort of collapse on stage, and then the guys like funeral bearers bringing on the cloak to put over him, and they'd throw off the cloak and get up again. And
there's an idea for
man's world. Yeah.
There's an idea for the Foxtrot tour. Maybe you could incorporate that.
The Fox's head. Yeah, the tartan blanket, the suspenders. Yeah.
Why not? Why not?
Why not? If only I could find a gimmick. Please write into this station and tell me what I should be doing. Yes.
Yes. Well, if you leave your comments below, if you've got any suggestions for some gimmicks.
Good. That's it.
Right. To what extent were you influenced by sort of quest kind of literature? Some fine examples, of course, you've got Christian from A Pilgrim's Progress. You've got that wise old sage Ian Anderson who incorporates Ronnie Pilgrim on Jethro Tull's A Passion Play. And of course, we have Traveller. Was this stuff an influence for you at all?
Well, I think literature itself has been an influence for quite some time. I mean, I had a birthday yesterday, and we're trying to have a clear out, but people brought me 9 books that I need to get through, and they're all lovely, of course. But I think what's lovely about reading books is it's a one-way conversation. You just shut up and listen. I like that very much. People who are far more articulate than me, I just sit and absorb it and go, wonderful. There might be the odd line I can use, but I'm amazed at the things that other people think. I'm not a mystery to myself. Everyone else is a mystery. That's why I like these one-way conversations, particularly when traveling myself.
Well, interestingly, just moving away from the new album, I read somewhere that The track Steps, one critic said that it has these dark Eastern European licks. It's obviously inspired by Bowie's Warszawa or Warsaw. Is he barking up the wrong tree there, do you think?
No, I'd say absolutely right. I might not have admitted to that a few years ago, but I did like that very much on Low.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And influenced by other things as well, influenced by Ravel, from Ravel to Bowie to Eno, all sorts of things. Yes. There have been a few live versions that have been quite extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
Usually with a drummer and sampled drums, so they're being triggered by a bass drum from one player and a bass drum being triggered as well, so to get enormous drums. So and sometimes with Ben Fenner putting on non-Lin effect on the drums, so that they sort of monster through it, so that it's like Iron Man cometh. I often want this sort of thing, and I find very often when I'm trying to get drum sounds in a studio that I can't always get this immediately, and I have to say bigger, better, brighter, more powerful, more. But live, I think there's an immediate understanding that if I do the steps, it'll be that more. I mean, I'd quite like to be there. It was something that my mother said the first time we did it, and I had a working title of it called Eric. She said she really liked that, and it was an unfinished version at that point. We didn't have all the harmonies, perhaps. But it's a strange one. When I listen to it back on Defector, I think, I wish I'd gotten the sounds of now out of that. I know that John Shearer's drums live had a very good sound naturally, and I wanted to be able to capture that. And we sent the drums out through a speaker in a church next to Wessex Studios, as we were allowed to do. And so we got somewhere near it, but not maybe as powerful as I wanted. So it's had a few revisits, of course, in the live department. But if I wanted it again, I'd probably make sure that I got this enormous bloody drum sound on it.
Right. And also, I have an interest. The Devil is an Englishman. Does this number pick up where the vampire with a healthy appetite leaves off?
Well, I think it might be the further adventures of that and Down Street, the sort of cod Shakespearean actor, the parody of all things from Keith Michel to Hammer Horror and all the rest. And of course, it was a Thomas Dolby track that I think was rejected on the end of the movie Gothic. I don't think Thomas even had a copy of it himself. And he was surprised that I got hold of a CD which had the music of the film. And I liked it so much, I bought the company. I went and did a version myself. So I can hear the phone ringing, probably telling me that I'm supposed to be talking to someone else immediately now. But always wonderful to talk to you, Barry. Thank you.
Do you want us to wrap it up then?
I think we may have to if I get the call from next door. Otherwise, I'm happy to carry on.
Okay, I was just going to ask you.
No, I'm being told, this is it. I'm being given the red light. I have to do that now. Sorry, mate.
So we're going to wrap it up now, are we?
Yes, I think we're happy.
Okay. Anyway, thank you for your time. This wonderful album, Circus the Nightwhale, is out this Friday. There is a purchasing link just below this video. Steve, I'll let you get on to your next interview.
Thank you so much.
And we'll talk again, no doubt, sometime.
We will.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks for saying kind things. Thank you, Barry. Thank you. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.